The Apache woman declared, "If you save me, sacred law forces me to give you a child." White heavy check mark. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, and a sharp wind cut through the narrow paths, carrying with it the scent of rain and wet earth. She had set out early in the morning, as was her custom, to gather herbs and plants that grew on the rocky cliffs. The mountains had always provided for her people, and she felt at home among their jagged edges and hidden streams. But today, the mountains felt different. Today, they were unpredictable. Her small pack pressed against her back, and her feet, though strong from years of climbing and walking the rough terrain, began to ache. The narrow trail she had followed so many times before seemed suddenly confusing, almost unrecognizable under the dim gray light of the storm. A misstep on the loose stones sent a small cascade tumbling down the side of the canyon. Naomi's heart pounded. She had survived storms before, but there was a sense of isolation now that made the wind seem sharper, the rocks steeper, and the shadows darker. She paused, catching her breath, trying to decide whether to turn back or push forward. That was when she heard the sound, soft at first, then more distinct, a voice calling out from somewhere above the cliff. Naomi froze. Visitors to her land were rare and strangers even rarer. The Apache had long held traditions of keeping their distance from outsiders, yet the voice carried no malice, only concern. She squinted into the dim light, trying to find the source. It was then that she saw him. A man, probably in his late 20s, with a sturdy frame, careful movements, and a face lined not with age but with concentration and thought. His clothes were different from the simple garments of her people, and his skin, fair and unweathered by the sun, told her he was not from the area. He had a map in one hand and a walking stick in the other, and he seemed to be navigating the treacherous paths as cautiously as she did. "Are you okay?" he called again, his voice steady despite the wind. Naomi hesitated. She knew the rules of her people. Trust was not given lightly, and life could be dangerous if one misjudged a stranger. But something in his tone was genuine. She stepped a little closer to the path where he could see her and raised her hand slightly, a signal she often used to communicate without words. He nodded, acknowledging her gesture, and carefully made his way toward her. Naomi noticed his careful steps, how he tested the ground before putting weight on it. She realized he respected the land, the rocks, the trees, and the animals. That was a small relief, though it did not erase her wariness. As he approached, he slowed, giving her space. "It's easy to get lost here," he said, his voice soft now, almost apologetic. "You shouldn't be out alone in this weather." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly, but she did not retreat. "I know these canyons," she replied, her voice calm but firm. She did not give her name, for that was sacred. Names were powerful in her culture, and strangers did not earn that trust easily. He studied her for a moment, as if trying to understand the careful balance between caution and necessity in her words. "I mean no harm," he said. "I'm just trying to find a safe path." There was honesty in his words, and she sensed it. Still, she had to be cautious. The mountains held dangers beyond wild animals or bad weather. They held stories, rules, and traditions that even she sometimes found daunting. The wind howled, carrying tiny pebbles that struck the cliffs like soft drums, and she shivered. "Follow the trail carefully," she said, her voice low. "Some paths are not as they seem." The man nodded again and began walking beside her at a respectful distance. She kept her eyes on the trail, scanning for loose rocks or unstable ground, while occasionally glancing at him. He moved with care, but she could see the concern on his face. She realized that he truly respected the land and the rules it demanded. That earned a small measure of her trust. Hours passed as they moved together. They did not speak much, for words were not always needed. The canyon itself seemed alive, whispering warnings and secrets in the wind. Naomi felt a strange comfort in the presence of another human being who did not rush, who seemed to understand that survival was a matter of patience and awareness. She had spent most of her life relying on her instincts and the wisdom passed down from her elders, but now she felt a quiet curiosity about this man who had entered her world. At one point, the trail narrowed, forcing them to move single file along a steep ledge. Naomi went first, testing each stone with her foot, her eyes scanning every crevice. The man followed closely, steady and careful. A small misstep could have been fatal here, but he did not panic. Naomi was impressed by his balance and focus. It reminded her of her father, who had taught her that fear could be a guide if respected, not a master to control you. As they moved, Naomi thought about her people's sacred laws. There were rules about life, death, and the bonds formed between those who helped each other. Strangers rarely came to these lands, and even fewer left without altering the course of someone's life. She wondered what her elders would say if they knew she was walking with a man from another world. There was a part of her that wanted to retreat, to disappear into the safety of the canyon's deeper paths, but another part felt that this encounter had meaning. Finally, as the sun began to break through the clouds, casting golden light over the rocks, they reached a small plateau. It overlooked a valley where the wind had carved intricate patterns into the earth over centuries. Naomi stopped and took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. She glanced at the man beside her. His clothes were damp from the rain, his face streaked with dirt, but there was a look of quiet relief in his eyes. "You made it," she said simply. He smiled, a small, tired smile. "Thanks to you," he replied. "I couldn't have done it alone." Naomi felt a pang of unease. His words were honest, yet they carried a weight she could not ignore. In her culture, helping someone could create a bond that went beyond words. There were consequences, sacred responsibilities, and unseen threads that tied one life to another. She did not yet know what this meant for her or for him, but she sensed that this moment would change the path of both their lives. They rested there for a while, catching their breath and drinking from a small stream that flowed along the plateau. Naomi observed him silently, noticing how carefully he treated the water, how he respected even the smallest stones around them. She realized that he was not just a visitor, he was someone who could understand the value of life in ways that many outsiders never did. Finally, as the sun climbed higher, Naomi spoke again. "The canyons are not forgiving," she said, her voice calm but carrying authority. "Those who enter must respect every step, every stone, every shadow. Do you understand?" "I understand," he replied without hesitation. "I will follow your lead." Naomi studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. There was trust now, fragile but real. She knew that the journey was far from over, and that danger still lurked in the hidden corners of the canyon. But for the first time that day, she felt a sense of partnership, a shared purpose with someone outside her world. As they prepared to continue, Naomi felt the weight of her own cultural responsibility pressing upon her. Saving a life was never simple. It carried consequences, unseen threads that could bind people together in ways both wonderful and frightening. She did not yet know the full measure of what this encounter would mean, but she knew that she had a role to play, and that the man beside her would be part of it. Together they moved forward, step by careful step, deeper into the canyon, each aware of the other's presence, each respecting the unspoken rules of the land. The storm had passed, but the mountains still demanded vigilance, patience, and respect. And Naomi, with her keen eyes and quiet strength, led the way, ready for whatever lessons the canyon would teach them both. The morning air was crisp as Naomi led the way through the canyon. The sun's rays had pierced through the clouds, casting long shadows across the rocky walls, making the landscape glow with golden light. Each step she took was careful and deliberate. She knew every stone, every crevice, every hidden danger that could catch an unwary traveler. The man walking behind her, John, followed with equal care. Though he had survived the initial storm, the canyon was still a place where one wrong step could mean serious injury. After some time, They reached a small clearing with soft grass beside a quiet stream. Nayeli motioned for John to sit. She knelt by the stream, cupping her hands to drink the cold, clear water. John watched her quietly, taking in the rhythm of her movements. There was a calmness in her, a connection to the land that he had never seen before. It was more than survival skill. It was respect, understanding, and perhaps even reverence. After a long pause, Nayeli spoke. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "You have helped me, and in our ways that is not just a small thing." She looked at him, her dark eyes steady, serious. John's brow furrowed slightly. He nodded, unsure of what she meant. "In my people's ways," she continued, "when someone's life is saved, it becomes more than a moment. It is bound by a law older than any of us, a law that carries consequences you may not yet understand." John leaned forward slightly. "I don't understand," he admitted. I didn't mean for this to become anything more than helping someone in danger." Nayeli's gaze softened, but it did not lose its intensity. "Intentions are part of it, yes, but the law is older than intentions. It speaks for itself. It says that if one saves a life, a bond is created, a bond that may reach into the next generation. It is not just about the moment, but about what comes after." John felt a sudden chill. He had traveled to study the land, the people, and their ways, but he had never encountered anything like this. "Next generation?" he asked carefully, choosing his words. "Are you saying it affects children?" Nayeli nodded slowly. "Yes. In rare cases, the law is specific. The act of saving a life is considered sacred. It creates responsibility. Those who save are bound in a way that may lead to family. It is not something decided lightly, and it is not a choice of the heart alone. The law decides, and it is not broken without consequence." John sat back, trying to process what she said. He had heard of traditions and customs that bound communities, but this was unlike anything he had studied or imagined. It was serious, real, and personal. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, even though he had not yet fully understood it. Nayeli, seeing his confusion, gestured to the stream. "Sit with me. Listen. When our ancestors speak through the land, they remind us of the balance of life. Every act of saving, every act of kindness has meaning. You have acted kindly, but now you must understand what that means." John sat cross-legged on the grass, listening as Nayeli's voice blended with the gentle sound of the stream. He realized that she was not just talking about a rule or a superstition. She was sharing a way of life, a view of the world where actions could echo far beyond the moment. Her words were both a warning and a gift, a chance to understand the depth of responsibility he had entered. Nayeli's tone grew firmer. "Some who have ignored this law thought they could walk away. They did not understand the danger, not just to themselves but to others. The law does not punish out of anger, it maintains balance. Those who break it may not see the consequences immediately, but they follow them. You must respect this, even if it feels strange to your world." John's mind raced. He had never been part of a culture where one act could reach so far, where one decision carried weight beyond understanding. Yet, as he watched Nayeli, he realized that this was not fear-mongering or superstition. It was belief, yes, but belief that guided generations. It shaped lives, determined choices, and maintained harmony. He began to understand why she had been so cautious when he first approached her. Trust was not given lightly, and life was intertwined with laws that demanded respect. Nayeli continued, her eyes following the flow of the stream. "I am not speaking of love or desire, not yet. I am speaking of responsibility. If you truly saved me, the law will decide what comes next. It may be a blessing. It may be a challenge. But it is not something we can ignore." John nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of her words. "I understand," he said quietly. "I will do what is right. I will not ignore it." Nayeli allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. "Good, that is the first step. Understanding is the beginning." The second step is respect. You must respect the law even if you do not fully understand it. You must respect me, my life, and my people's ways. Only then can we move forward without bringing harm to ourselves or others. For a long while they sat in silence, the canyon around them alive with the sounds of the wind, birds, and flowing water. John reflected on his life, the modern world, the comforts, the freedom to make choices, and realized how limited it had been. In this place every decision mattered, every action had consequences. And now he was part of something bigger than himself, something that required humility, patience, and honor. Eventually, Naeli stood, brushing the grass from her clothes. "We must continue," she said. "The path is not easy and the canyon does not forgive carelessness. I will guide you, but you must pay attention always." John rose as well, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The words she had spoken, the sacred law, weighed on him, but they also inspired him. This was not just about survival or exploration. This was about understanding a culture, respecting life, and learning responsibility in a way he had never imagined. They began moving again, stepping carefully over rocks, around fallen trees, and through patches of loose soil. Naeli led with confidence, her every movement deliberate, her eyes scanning constantly. John followed, learning from her example, aware that missteps were not just physical but moral. He felt the connection growing, a quiet bond forged through trust and shared journey, but one always shadowed by the weight of the law she had described. As the day wore on, they found a sheltered area where they could rest. Naeli prepared a simple meal from roots and herbs she had collected earlier, while John helped gather firewood. Words were few, but the presence of each other was comforting. John realized that trust was being built slowly, quietly, without force. It was a delicate process, much like navigating the canyon itself. That night, as the stars emerged one by one in the dark sky, Naeli spoke again. "Tomorrow, we will face paths that are more difficult. You must remember what I have told you. Saving a life is not always simple. It carries consequences, sometimes seen, sometimes hidden. If you respect this, we will survive. If not," she let the warning hang in the air, unspoken but understood. John nodded. "I will remember. I will respect it, I promise." Naeli's eyes softened slightly, but the seriousness remained. "It is not a promise to me," she said quietly, "but to the law itself. And it is a promise to yourself, for the canyon tests those who ignore it. The law is older than any one of us. It is the voice of our ancestors, the spirit of the land, and the balance of life. Remember this always." That night, as they lay beneath a sky full of stars, John reflected on the strange, powerful connection between action and consequence, between life saved and responsibility owed. He realized that he had entered a world far beyond the ordinary, a world where every choice was sacred and every step mattered. Naeli's words echoed in his mind, a reminder that life was not just to be lived, but to be honored. And somewhere deep in the canyon, the wind carried the whispers of generations, telling stories of those who had come before, those who had acted with honor, and those who had faltered. John understood, for the first time, that his journey was no longer only about exploration. It was about understanding, respect, and walking carefully within a world far older and wiser than he had ever known. The dawn of the next day promised more challenges, but also more lessons. Naeli, with her calm strength and deep knowledge of the law, would guide him. And John, aware of the sacred responsibility now resting on his shoulders, would follow with respect, humility, and vigilance. Together they were bound, not just by circumstance, but by a law older than either of them, one that would shape the days, choices, and lives that lay ahead. The next morning, the canyon was bathed in soft, golden light, and the air smelled of wet stone and fresh growth. Naeli rose first, as always, moving with quiet precision. Her every step was measured, her eyes scanning the landscape, taking in every detail, every stone, every shadow, every subtle change in the terrain. John watched her silently, still learning the rhythm of the land, still trying to understand the deep connection she had with it. Today, the path ahead would be more challenging. The canyon walls narrowed, forcing them to navigate tight ledges and slippery slopes. Nayeli knew these paths well, but she also knew that danger increased with every step. One careless move and the consequences could be severe. She glanced back at John, reading his face for signs of hesitation. He had followed her before, but the real test of trust was only beginning. As they began their ascent, Nayeli spoke softly. "The canyon tests more than your body. It tests your patience, your focus, and your understanding of what is right. You must not only watch the stones beneath your feet, but also the choices you make in your heart. Every act carries weight." John nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his chest. This was no longer simply a physical journey. It was a journey of character and conscience. He realized that every action he had taken to help Nayeli had meaning far beyond what he had imagined. Her people's sacred law was not a set of rules to follow blindly. It was a living guide, a reflection of respect, honor, and responsibility. The climb grew steeper, and the trail became less distinct. Loose stones shifted under their weight, and small rocks tumbled into the ravine below. Nayeli moved ahead, her feet sure, her balance perfect. John followed carefully, testing each foothold before committing his weight. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain and the chill of higher altitudes. His muscles ached, and his focus wavered, but he forced himself to remain calm. He understood now that fear and haste could be dangerous companions. Hours passed in tense silence. Nayeli spoke only when necessary, guiding him over dangerous patches, warning him of unstable rocks, and sharing small details about the plants and animals that thrived in the canyon. Each word, though simple, carried wisdom. John began to see the canyon not just as a physical challenge but as a teacher, offering lessons about respect, balance, and the intricate web of life. At one point, they reached a narrow ledge that jutted out over a deep ravine. Nayeli stopped and looked back at John. "This is the first true test," she said quietly. "You must trust yourself, but also remember the law. It watches not only your steps but your intentions." John swallowed hard. He had never felt such responsibility resting on him. The sacred law Nayeli had spoken of weighed heavily on his mind. He realized that every choice he made now, every movement he took, would carry consequences he could not fully predict. Yet, he also understood that hesitation or fear would only make matters worse. He had to act with calm, respect, and clarity. Slowly, carefully, he placed his foot on the first stone of the ledge. It wobbled slightly, but held firm. Nayeli moved beside him, her hand brushing his shoulder in a gesture that was more reassurance than touch. John felt a surge of determination. He could not fail, not here, not now. The law, the canyon, Nayeli herself, all demanded his full attention. Step by step, they crossed the ledge. The wind whipped against their faces, threatening to unbalance them, but they moved steadily, each relying on the other's presence without speaking. When they reached the other side, John exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. Nayeli nodded, her eyes serious but approving. "You are learning," she said simply. "Remember, the canyon teaches patience and care. It also watches your heart." They continued on, the trail growing more complex. They had to climb over fallen trees, navigate streams swollen with recent rains, and find safe footing on rocky slopes slick with moisture. John realized that the canyon demanded not just physical skill, but mental clarity. Every step, every decision, was a test of judgment and restraint. As they rested by a small pool of clear water, Nayeli spoke again. "Some who have walked this path before you have failed not because of the canyon, but because of themselves. They ignored the law, ignored respect, ignored the weight of their actions. You have been given a chance to act differently, but the law does not forgive carelessness." John listened, absorbing her words. He realized that this journey was shaping him in ways he had never expected. It was not enough to simply act. He had to understand, respect, and carry the consequences of every decision. The sacred law was not a punishment. It was a guide, a reflection of the balance of life and the bonds that connected people across generations. As they moved on, Nayeli began to share small stories of her ancestors, of those who had walked the canyon before her. Some had been brave and wise, others reckless and impulsive. Each story carried a lesson, a warning, or an inspiration. John found himself captivated by these tales, realizing that they were more than history. They were living reminders of the law and the responsibilities it demanded. By mid-afternoon, the weather began to shift again. Clouds gathered on the horizon and the wind picked up, carrying a hint of rain. Nayeli's eyes narrowed as she scanned the canyon. "We must find shelter soon," she said. "The canyon can change in an instant. You must be ready to move quickly but with care. Hurry without caution can be fatal." They found a small overhang on a rocky slope, providing partial protection from the approaching storm. Nayeli quickly gathered dry wood and used it to start a small fire. John helped, learning how to recognize suitable materials and how to build a flame that would last. Together, they created a small sanctuary against the harsh weather outside. As they sat by the fire, Nayeli looked at John. "The canyon tests the body, but the law tests the spirit," she said. "You have proven that you can follow, that you can act with care. But the next trials will challenge more than skill. They will challenge your understanding, your patience, and your respect for life itself." John nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He realized that this journey was far more than a physical adventure. It was a journey of character, a test of conscience, and a lesson in humility. The sacred law she spoke of was not a threat but a guide, demanding honesty, care, and awareness. He understood now that his actions were no longer his own. They were part of a larger story, a web of life that extended beyond the present moment. The storm arrived with the first drops of rain pattering against the rocks. Nayeli adjusted their shelter and watched carefully as the wind whipped around them. John observed her, noticing the way she moved with ease, respect, and calm. He realized that her strength came not just from physical skill, but from understanding the canyon, the law, and the connections that bound her life to the land and its rules. That night, as the rain fell steadily outside, John reflected on the day. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and the physical challenges of the canyon, but he had also faced the weight of responsibility. The sacred law was no longer an abstract concept. It was a reality, one that demanded respect, thoughtfulness, and care. He realized that failing to honor it could have consequences far beyond anything he had imagined. Nayeli sat quietly beside the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames. She was calm, yet her presence carried the weight of centuries of tradition. John understood that she had been shaped by this law her entire life, guided by it in every decision, every step, every action. He felt a growing admiration and respect for her strength, wisdom, and clarity. As the night deepened, the canyon seemed to speak to them in whispers, the rustle of leaves, the trickle of water, the sigh of the wind. John listened, feeling a deep connection to the land and the law that governed it. He knew that the challenges ahead would be even greater, that the tests of character and conscience were only beginning. Yet, he also knew that he was learning, growing, and becoming part of something far larger than himself. By the time the storm passed, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. The sacred law, the canyon, and Nayeli's guidance had opened his eyes to a world of responsibility, respect, and connection. He realized that every action he took now, every choice he made, would echo beyond the present moment. The canyon had tested him, but it had also taught him the importance of patience, care, and understanding. As dawn approached, Nayeli stood and looked toward the path ahead. John rose beside her, ready to continue, aware that the journey was far from over. The canyon had tested them physically, mentally, and spiritually, and the law continued to watch, guiding their steps and shaping their path. Together, they would face the trials ahead, bound by trust, respect, and the sacred responsibility that had begun with a single act of life-saving courage. The next morning, the canyon seemed to breathe around them, alive with the soft rustle of wind and the distant call of birds. Hidden among the rocks, Naomi rose with the first light, moving as silently as a shadow across the rocky ground. John followed, still feeling the weight of the lessons he had learned, the sacred law, the canyon's challenges, and the trust they had slowly built. But today, he sensed that the canyon had something more difficult in store for them. The path ahead was narrower, steeper, and more treacherous than any they had faced before. Loose stones shifted underfoot, and sheer cliffs dropped sharply on either side. Naomi led with steady confidence, her eyes scanning every crevice, every shadow, every change in the wind and light. John struggled to keep pace, his muscles aching from days of climbing and balancing, but he knew that the physical difficulty was only part of the challenge. The sacred law, with its invisible threads and expectations, weighed heavily on his mind. Every step, every decision, carried consequences far beyond the present moment. As they climbed, Naomi spoke softly, her voice cutting through the quiet of the canyon. The trials ahead are not only of the body but of the heart and mind. The canyon tests honesty, patience, and respect. It will reveal your character, even when you think no one is watching. Remember what I have told you. The law sees what your eyes may not, feels what your heart may hide. John nodded, absorbing her words. He realized that his focus had to be complete. Hesitation, distraction, or carelessness could endanger not only himself but Naomi as well. The responsibility of having saved her and the consequences of that act under her people's law now felt like a heavy cloak on his shoulders. He had to move carefully, think clearly, and act with integrity at every turn. Hours passed as they navigated the canyon. They crossed narrow ledges, carefully sidestepped unstable rocks, and climbed over fallen trees that blocked their path. John noticed how intuitive Naomi's movements were. She seemed to know the land in a way that went beyond experience. She felt it. Every step she took was precise, deliberate, and full of understanding. John began to realize that her strength was not only physical but spiritual. The sacred law had shaped her entire life, guiding her actions, her choices, and her awareness of the world around her. At one point, they reached a section of the canyon where a small river had carved deep into the rock, creating a series of slippery, moss-covered steps. Naomi paused and looked at John. "This is a test of trust," she said quietly. "You must rely on your instincts and the lessons you have learned. Do not rush. The law favors patience and care." John carefully stepped onto the first mossy stone, testing its stability with his weight. The surface shifted slightly under his foot, and his heart raced. Naomi moved beside him, placing a hand lightly on his arm, not to guide him but to remind him of her presence. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, and continued step by step. Slowly, steadily, they crossed the river, reaching solid ground on the other side. John exhaled, relief washing over him, and he realized that this was more than a physical test. It was a lesson in patience, trust, and the importance of mindful action. They continued on, moving deeper into the canyon. The landscape grew more rugged, the cliffs taller, and the shadows longer. Naomi's expression grew serious as she led John through a narrow gorge, where the walls rose steeply on either side, creating a tunnel-like effect. The sun's light barely penetrated, and the air felt cooler, heavier, and charged with a sense of anticipation. John felt a mix of awe and unease. The canyon seemed alive, as if it were watching them, testing their resolve. As they walked, Naomi spoke of her ancestors, of those who had walked these paths before her. She told stories of people who had ignored the law, acting carelessly or selfishly, and of those who had respected it, acting with honor and humility. Each story carried a lesson, a warning, and a reminder that the sacred law was not punishment but guidance, a reflection of balance, respect, and responsibility. John listened intently, realizing that these stories were not just history, they were living lessons, meant to shape behavior and character in real time. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds began to gather once more. The wind picked up, whistling through the narrow gorge, and small drops of rain began to fall. Nayeli's eyes narrowed as she scanned the canyon for shelter. "We must move quickly," she said. "The canyon can change suddenly. What is safe one moment can become dangerous the next." They found a shallow cave, just large enough to provide protection from the rain. Nayeli quickly gathered small branches and dry leaves to build a fire, while John helped, learning to recognize materials that would burn steadily without producing too much smoke. The fire crackled to life and they sat close, warming themselves and taking a moment to rest. As the rain fell outside, Nayeli spoke quietly, her voice carrying both gravity and calm authority. "You have done well to this point, but the greatest test is still ahead. The canyon will now challenge your understanding, your patience, and your respect for the law. You must remember what I have taught you. Every action, every decision carries weight. The law does not forgive thoughtlessness or carelessness." John nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his chest. He understood now that this journey was far more than physical endurance. It was a test of character, conscience, and awareness. The sacred law was no longer an abstract concept. It was a living reality, guiding their steps and shaping the path ahead. He felt a deep respect for Nayeli, for her wisdom, and for the traditions that had shaped her life. As the rain eased, they prepared to continue. The canyon ahead was steeper, with jagged rocks and narrow ledges that required careful navigation. John felt the strain in his legs and arms, but he also felt a growing sense of determination. He would not falter. He would honor the trust Nayeli had placed in him, the lessons of the law, and the responsibility that came with having saved her life. The climb grew more difficult. Loose rocks shifted underfoot, and the wind threatened to unbalance them. Nayeli moved ahead, her eyes scanning the path, her movements fluid and precise. John followed closely, his focus unwavering. At one particularly narrow ledge, he lost his footing slightly, but Nayeli's hand was there, steadying him before he could fall. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them, trust, respect, and shared responsibility. Hours later, they reached a plateau overlooking a deep valley. The storm had passed, leaving the canyon sparkling with fresh rain and sunlight reflecting off wet rocks. They sat quietly, taking in the view, the air filled with the scent of earth and stone. Nayeli spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "You have faced many challenges, and you have done so with care and respect. But remember, the law is not finished with us. The choices we make now will determine what comes next. Honor, patience, and awareness must guide every step." John felt a profound sense of understanding. The sacred law, the canyon, and Nayeli's guidance had taught him lessons far beyond what he had expected. He realized that every act, every decision, and every moment carried weight. Life was not just a series of events but a web of responsibility, connection, and consequence. As night fell, they set up a small camp on the plateau. Nayeli prepared a simple meal, while John helped gather water and maintain the fire. They spoke little, but the silence was comfortable, filled with mutual respect and understanding. John reflected on the day, the challenges, the lessons, and the growing bond with Nayeli. He realized that this journey was shaping him in ways he had never imagined, preparing him for the trials that lay ahead. Before sleeping, Nayeli spoke one final time. "Tomorrow, the canyon will demand more than skill. It will demand understanding, respect, and the strength to act with honor. Remember, the law watches not only what you do but why you do it. The greatest challenges are often invisible, but they are no less real. John nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle into his mind and heart. He understood now that the journey was far from over, and that the sacred law was a guide, a test, and a responsibility that he could not ignore. The canyon had challenged him physically, mentally, and spiritually, and the lessons were far from complete. But he felt ready to continue, strengthened by the trust he had earned, the lessons he had learned, and the bond he shared with Nayeli. As they lay beneath the stars that night, the canyon seemed to hum with life. John felt a deep connection to the land, to Nayeli, and to the sacred law that governed their journey. He understood that the greatest trials were still to come, and that he would need all his courage, wisdom, and respect to face them. And somewhere deep in the canyon, the wind whispered of challenges, choices, and the delicate balance between life, honor, and responsibility. The morning air was crisp and still, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine from the canyon walls. Nayeli rose first, as always, her movements fluid and careful. She scanned the horizon, her eyes reflecting the determination that had guided her through countless challenges. John watched her silently, understanding that today would be different. They had faced storms, treacherous paths, and tests of patience and courage, but now the final stage of their journey had arrived. The sacred law, the law that had shaped their bond from the moment he had saved her, would reveal its meaning in ways he was only beginning to understand. They began their descent into the canyon, the terrain growing more rugged and uneven with every step. Loose rocks and hidden crevices forced John to concentrate fully, relying not only on his physical strength but also on the lessons Nayeli had taught him. He moved with patience, careful to honor the sacred trust between them. The canyon, with its jagged cliffs and narrow passages, seemed almost alive, as if it watched their progress and measured their intentions. Nayeli spoke softly, breaking the silence. The law does not demand blind obedience. It watches, guides, and teaches. You have followed its lessons well, but the greatest test is how you act when no one else can see. True respect, true understanding, is not performed for reward. It is acted upon because it is right. John nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He realized that everything they had experienced, the treacherous climbs, the whispered stories of her ancestors, the careful navigation of every obstacle, had prepared him for this moment. The sacred law was no longer abstract. It was real, living, and intertwined with every choice he made. As they navigated a particularly narrow ridge, Nayeli paused and looked at him. Here, the canyon demands not speed but thought. Each step is a decision, each movement a reflection of your heart. Remember what I have taught you. The law is not broken by misfortune but by carelessness and disrespect. John concentrated, placing each foot carefully, steadying himself with his arms and balance. The ridge was slick from recent rain, and a single misstep could send him sliding down to the rocks below. Nayeli moved beside him, guiding with a quiet presence rather than physical touch, reminding him that the law also guided him internally. He felt a mixture of fear and focus, but the lessons of the past days, patience, awareness, respect, helped steady his mind. Finally, they reached a small plateau overlooking a wide valley. The sight took John's breath away. The sun had broken fully through the clouds, illuminating the canyon in brilliant light. The valley stretched before them, a tapestry of stone, earth, and greenery, untouched and pristine. Nayeli's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained vigilant. "This place," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "is sacred. Those who reach it after the trials are tested in more than strength. They are tested in spirit, in understanding, in their respect for life. You have come far, and yet the final lesson is within, not before you." John looked at her, realizing that the journey was not about conquering the canyon, but about understanding the sacred law and the connection it created between them. Saving Nayeli had set events in motion he could not have anticipated. The law had bound them in responsibility, and now it demanded awareness, empathy, and honor. Naomi knelt by a small spring at the plateau, cupping the cool, clear water in her hands. She offered some to John, and he drank gratefully. "The water is pure," she said. "It represents clarity. The law requires clarity as well. You must see clearly, act clearly, and understand the consequences of your actions." John nodded, feeling the full gravity of the lessons he had absorbed. He thought about the days they had spent together, the storms they had faced, the treacherous climbs, the narrow ledges, the quiet moments by the fire, and the stories of her ancestors. Each moment had been a test, a preparation, and a lesson. And now he realized the sacred law's purpose was fully clear. It was not meant to punish or frighten. It was meant to guide, to teach, and to form bonds of responsibility and respect that could last generations. Naomi's voice drew his attention again. "There is one final choice," she said. "It is not forced upon you. The law guides, but it does not command blindly. You have acted with care, respect, and understanding. Now you must decide how to honor what has been shared between us." John thought carefully. He understood that his choices had consequences beyond his immediate understanding. He had saved Naomi, followed her through the canyon, and absorbed the wisdom of her people. Now he needed to act with integrity, honoring the bond that the sacred law had created. "I will act with respect and care," he said, his voice steady. "I will honor the lessons you have taught me and the responsibility the law has entrusted to me. I will not take lightly what has been shared, and I will carry it with honor." Naomi studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You have understood well. The law does not demand more than what is right and honorable. It sees your heart, your intention, and your actions. You have passed its trials." A sense of relief and accomplishment washed over John. He realized that the journey had transformed him. He had not only survived the physical challenges of the canyon, but had also grown in understanding, humility, and respect for life and tradition. The sacred law, once mysterious and daunting, had become a guide, shaping his actions and his character. They spent the rest of the day exploring the plateau, observing the land and reflecting on the journey. Naomi shared more stories of her ancestors, each one emphasizing the importance of wisdom, respect, and care. John listened intently, absorbing the lessons not as distant tales but as living guidance that he could carry into his own life. As evening approached, they prepared to camp on the plateau. The sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. John felt a deep sense of peace. The canyon, once threatening and challenging, now felt like a teacher, a guide, and a protector. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and responsibility, and had emerged with understanding, respect, and a profound appreciation for the sacred law. Naomi sat quietly by the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames and the stars beginning to appear above the canyon walls. John joined her, sitting close but with respect for her space. They did not need many words. The bond between them, formed through the trials of the canyon and the guidance of the law, was strong and unspoken. Finally, Naomi spoke, her voice soft and steady. "You have learned well. The law has watched, guided, and tested you. It has created a bond that is honored, not forced. You have acted with integrity, respect, and understanding. That is all it asks." John nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply. "I will never forget what I have learned here," he said. "Not just about the canyon or the law, but about life, responsibility, and respect. I will carry it with me always." Naomi smiled faintly, a mixture of approval and quiet pride. "That is all the law asks. It does not demand more than honor, care, and understanding. You have shown these, and in doing so, you have honored not only me but the wisdom of generations that came before us." The night settled over the canyon, peaceful and still. The wind whispered softly through the cliffs, carrying with it the echoes of lessons learned, bonds formed, and respect earned. John felt a deep connection to the land, to Nayeli, and to the sacred law that had guided their journey. He realized that this experience would shape him forever, teaching him humility, awareness, and the importance of acting with integrity. In the quiet of the night, John reflected on everything that had led to this moment. He thought about the storm that had started their journey, the treacherous paths, the narrow ledges, and the countless choices he had made. Each step had been guided by the sacred law, each decision weighed with responsibility. And through it all, he had learned that true strength was not measured by physical skill alone, but by the heart, the mind, and the respect one shows to life and to others. By dawn, the canyon was calm and bright once more. Nayeli and John prepared to descend, moving carefully but confidently. The journey had changed them both. John had grown in understanding, patience, and respect, while Nayeli had guided him with wisdom and trust. The sacred law had been honored, the trials overcome, and the bond between them strengthened in ways neither could have predicted. As they walked side by side, John felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had entered the canyon as a stranger, unfamiliar with the land and the law, but he would leave forever changed. The lessons of respect, care, and integrity would stay with him, guiding his actions, choices, and relationships for the rest of his life. Nayeli looked at him, her expression calm and approving. The canyon teaches those who listen. You have listened well. Remember the law, the lessons, and the bond it creates. And remember that respect and understanding are the true measures of a person. John nodded, feeling the truth of her words sink deeply into his heart. He knew that their journey, though complete, would continue to shape him. The sacred law, once mysterious and daunting, had become a living guide, a reflection of responsibility, respect, and connection. He understood that the greatest lessons of life often come from the challenges we face, the bonds we form, and the wisdom we choose to honor. And so, with the canyon stretching ahead and the sun rising behind them, John and Nayeli continued their path, forever bound by respect, responsibility, and the sacred law that had guided them through the trials of the canyon. The journey had ended, but the lessons, the understanding, and the bond would last a lifetime, shaping the choices and actions of both in ways they could only begin to imagine.